In this society that we live, Luisa, there are a lot of misassignments. There are roles that are misassigned to people, right? For example, parents play the role of children, children play the role of parents, moms play the dads, and vice versa, all that. In the work, we talk about reclaiming your rightful place in the system, within the system, right? And sometimes
Yes.
when out in life we don't really realize that we're playing somebody else's role. We're just doing it without
Mhm.
realizing it even. So how one can reclaim their rightful, natural place in their own family system on a daily basis, or how do we become aware of it?
I think really a big part here is what is your place currently in your system, right? And slowly identifying what that is. And that may not be at all your rightful place. So, like you said, in many cases, maybe your current place in your family system is taking care of mom. And I'm not talking about, your mom is elderly and you have to take care of her. That's a nice way to give back to our parents when they're getting older. I'm more speaking about that was your role when you were like even before you were born even, right? Or maybe when you were very young. To identify do I have even a place in my system? Do I feel like I have a place there? B, do I have my rightful place? And the rightful place is always there is a family hierarchy. And this family hierarchy is, and again, we could protest that, but it's in the long run, it's not going to serve us. We could be like, well, I'm bigger than my mom because I have my stuff together, right? Yes, that's sounds good for you, but I promise you, ultimately, in the long run, it might not serve you, right? Because you're making yourself much bigger than your parent. And again, sometimes you're being pushed into the role of being bigger than your parent, even if you didn't want that. So now, in terms of the family systemic order, it's always the elders are the bigger. Like, so the further you go back, it's like you can kind of go like this, yeah? So you have, like, I don't know, the great grandparent, the grandparent, the grandparent, the parent, and the child. And the child may be the seeker, the person who comes with the issue, right? So that is, systemically speaking, the smallest person in the system. Yeah. And so if you revert that for whatever reason, and often again, we've been pushed into those roles, but often also we have taken on those roles because for whatever reason we don't like our system, right? That we were given. That's the system you were born into. That's it. You're not going to get any different. Yeah. In terms of your ancestry.
Right.
So what we notice is, how about instead of protesting that dynamic, let's say, like protesting that dynamic that you're small and they're big and they're your family and they're where you come from, if you want to or not, I could fight that and go like this my whole life. Or I could try putting myself into my rightfully sized shoes and say, you know what? I'm just your child. I'm not your caregiver. I'm just your child. Or I'm just your granddaughter. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so what happens is I'm actively placing myself into my rightful place. And over time, it's almost like a practice, really, which is what this work is also. This work is a practice, more so than a modality or alternative therapy. Like, it is a practice. And so what happens is I stop pushing and putting so much energy in pushing away. Because that is really the main problem that people have, is spending so much time pushing away and sometimes not wanting to face, or sometimes just pushing away and being very angry about it, right? How about we try to revert that, and so that actually all of a sudden we are free to put our energy elsewhere. It frees us. And
Could
this
you
is an observation. Yeah.
Could you please elaborate this a little bit more?
Yeah.
What are we pushing away?
It could be you pushing away your parents. That's the most common story for probably most of us. Yeah. For whatever reason, you are in conflict with your mom, let's say, right? And what happens is if I keep pushing my mom away my whole life, that's where my energy will be bound. So what does that mean for my what we call the present system? That is partnership, work, children, if there are any. That is present system. Okay, that's what comes after you.
Yes.
So if I my whole life just put my mom away, yeah, and say I don't like you, I hate you, for whatever reason. Again, I'm not talking about boundaries. Everybody needs boundaries,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
But like I'm talking larger than that. I'm talking about internally, I'm really rejecting my mother internally. Let's say that as an example. What happens is I will notice that in my partnerships. I will notice that in my work. I will notice that with my relationship with my children, in my relationship with my children. So if there are children. So those are the dynamics that I observe. And I have observed, and a lot of my colleagues have observed, that if you start giving your people a good place in your heart, and I know that sounds very lovey-dovey, but I mean it like on an and like really genuinely saying from your heart, I take you as my mother, I take you as my father. That's what I've been given. And I can say yes to that. And that's a big deal, by the way. That's not easy. Like I genuinely say yes to you as my parent. It's going to change your life. I believe that. It can definitely change your life, particularly if that was your dynamic before. Yeah, the pushing away part. It
Very
will
interesting.
change a lot. And you will notice that you might have healthier partnerships. And again, I took the example of the mom. It could be exactly
The
example. I could
father as
be just
well.
pushing away my dad, right? For
Yes. Yes.
whatever and sometimes very justified reason. I'm not saying that the pushing away comes only from, oh, now she's mad again. Like it's sometimes very justified, right? And sometimes, of course, particularly when abuse comes into the game, there's a lot of layers to that. And so we're working through the different types of layers. There's more layers to it. It's more complex. It's not just like that. Yeah. But I'm speaking about, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying that acceptance in your own heart as the cards that you have been dealt with.
Yes, it is almost it's a part of your fate, if you believe in fate or not, but for lack of a better word, that is part of your incarnation of your path is also the cards you've been dealt, the family you've been born into. Even again, if it doesn't seem fair, right? The word fairness is often so like, why? This is so unfair. Yes, it is unfair. It is always unfair. And that is the part that seems fairly random to us, right? It's like, why is this person carrying so much and this person is carrying less, right? Is this person born into this family and this person is born into this family, right? I think the how we can kind of comfort ourselves a little bit is please know, no matter how great some other person's family may look to you, like maybe you come from a really difficult family background, no matter how great or how rich or however, whatever you're, wanting to envision, know that every family system has its imbalances, no, regardless of how great they're doing, how great they're looking, how much money they have, et cetera, et cetera.
So this balance that we work on in the workshops, can it be done in real life? Or does the rebalancing have to be done on a soul and energetic level?
It is long lasting if you do it on a soul level. Then it's actually, this is why a lot of, as much as I absolutely adore talk therapy, please do your therapy, everyone. It's great. The problem is sometimes I get most of the time people who come from talk therapy to me or have even been referred to me from talk therapy, which again, thank you, therapists. The thing is here, when you keep hitting a wall, it's often with an issue. It's often a very good sign that something systemic is going on. What that means is something that's larger than you, something that's in your system that is not so much about just you, an entanglement. And this is where systemic work is obviously the most effective because that's where we can help the most. And so it's really, you can talk a lot about an issue. That is great to first gain awareness of it. But sometimes the implication of experiencing it, embodying it, which is what we're doing in the constellation space, is needed to really see the dynamics and feel the dynamics at work. Again, an observation, but that is why I definitely would recommend systemic work, family constellation work for certain issues and for, again, a lot of things where people feel stuck, particularly.
Would you please name some of the main issues that would actually that family constellation would be a great resolution for? We have time.
List. You know, I think I'm gonna list ones where where like where it might not be a good fit. Okay, because I
Okay.
think there's an endless list. I think the one main thing that you have to be clear about is is my issue existential to a certain degree? Like, can I not function on a daily basis? If I cannot function on a daily basis, then constellation work is, yes, that is for you. If it's like, I'm taking myself as an example. I just had a knee injury and it was really frustrating, right? Like I had never had a knee injury before. I was very immobile. It's annoying and it's definitely affected my everyday life, but I knew I can move into healing. Like it's not gonna be forever. It's not gonna, the things where would I do a constellation around my knee? Maybe not. Yeah. Unless this keeps going on for like, I don't know, 10 years, then maybe, or 5 years even. Yeah. Um, but that is not to say like somebody with maybe different, let's say different injury, like multiple injuries in the body who is bedridden for over a year or two. That again, I would be curious to like, or I'd be interested in opening a constellation around that to see what's going on here. Is there anything else beneath that? Let's say they lost their job because of that, etc. So things that really seem existential, like I've been trying everything and it's not working and I need to pass through. That's usually the people who come to me in that kind of state often as well. But yeah, just a deep stuckness, or I've been feeling really heavy my whole life. Yeah. Some where you just really, you're sensing you carrying something really heavily with you all your life. Probably something systemic. Yeah. So it can be any issue. It does not have to relate to your family. It does
Mhm.
not have to be your issue. Does not have to be, I have issues with my mom. Like it doesn't have to be that. It can be something completely different. Work, money, whatever. Yeah. Addictions, anything. Yeah.
Understood.
Hmm.
Can we talk about the unborn and the departed and the ancestors and people we never met, people who were supposed to come to life, they never made it to this life, and the emotional way that we carry for those people? Sometimes we don't even know, especially when they are our siblings, that we were born like way after them. But what is their place in our lives? And because I noticed that we acknowledge them, we recognize them for one, we acknowledge their existence and we accept them as part of the family system and give them a place, if you will. So how does the whole acknowledging part of that work?
For myself, I explain it, which I only do to a certain extent when I'm in the field. But here in this interview, I can explain it more.
Please, yeah.
Personally, I always start with it's the serving we serve the mother or the pregnant person. That needs to be the priority. So that person comes first, again, because they were there first. So I need to make sure, or my work ahead is to see what helps that person. Let's say somebody lost a child in maybe in while giving birth, or somebody had to give birth to a child that was already dead, right? Or a miscarriage. And I can speak about abortions as well. So the problem is, and this is what I often say in the space, so we can take that in a little bit more. The problem is that we pretty much from every society that I know of in the world, talking about these kind of things are not always very common nor welcomed. So I'm just noticing that women and pregnant people are very often, of course, definitely judged, but there is always something about, particularly when it comes to miscarriage, also abortions, right? Where it's like, oh, so what? It's not a big deal. Just move on, right? There's that societally, that's kind of the realm because we're living mostly in patriarchies, right? So it's like, oh, like men also don't know how it feels, right? Actually, physically, right? So it's like it's a different situation. And I think they of course have then carry pain on a different level, but like in terms of the physical component, it's very invasive. It's a very can be very invasive, very painful. It's a physical experience, right? So I need to serve the person who has had the most pain, and that would be the mother or the pregnant person. Um and that's systemically my where I'm looking. And the only person who can then go through this process first would be that person. And then, of course, let's say there's a father involved, I could bring the father in as well. And really often, I also see the pain that the men are carrying is really, really intense and they need to process a lot. So I bring them in with the representative and let that also play out. And that's usually very healing for the couple as well. So it's almost a bit like a ritual because societally we're not given a lot of space to process these things that are very intense. Like, nobody's like, great, it's so much fun to have an abortion. Like,
Yep.
it's not fun. Like, it's often, again, a very intense and not pleasant experience. And so we're giving a space for people to grieve, maybe even their physical pain, their experience, right? To process that and acknowledge that it's not just, oh, so what? Just move on. It's not a big deal. Yeah. Because it is not a big deal. There is a moment in time where either there is a child or there's not a child, right? And that's a big fork, regardless of, let's say, a decision we're making or again, a miscarriage potentially happening. So we need to acknowledge that. And again, then sit with the person who needs to go through this process. It's almost like a ritual, really. And we can do that in constellations. And the way to do that, which is why, we acknowledge, we have seen that the most effective way is to put a placeholder representative person for that unborn or that lost or that aborted or that whatever little entity energy, and say, you know what, you have a place in my heart because there was that moment. Yeah. And then we can actually, when we go through whatever is attached to that, whatever emotions, whatever entanglement, then we can move on from there once we have actually looked at it. And that, again, is an observation. And I have never experienced anything else in the space. Like, this is when that happens, and that is a topic for the person. Again, it doesn't always have to come up, but when it comes up, that seems to be the right way. I always just go with what I see and trust that what I see, it's going to give me the feedback in the space. I don't have to, I'm never imposing my own whatever, right? Like, I'm just listening to what's happening and following what is needed in that space. And that seems to be the movement that in, I dare say, 99.9% of the cases that I've ever worked in happens. It
It's so
needs to
much.
be released.
It does. There's no word, like you said, there's no word that can explain that. I saw it a few times and I'm like, whoa, this is truly magical. But what would be the side effect for the siblings of that entity who never
Yeah.
met their siblings, but that person like you said, individual exists on a soul level?
So quite often, again, if that space, that place has been acknowledged, that sibling energy has been acknowledged by, let's say, the mother, or again, the pregnant person, or the parents, really, even also let's say there's a father, that's also important. If that energy space has been acknowledged as, you are our child, energetically speaking, energetically, you are our child, and we give you a place. It's like planting a tree. Yeah, some people plant a tree. It's another way of ritualing this, right? I think I just made that word, but I like it.
That word?
But ritualing, I love that word. I think I just made it up, but I love it. But so there's different ways of doing a ritual around this, but this is one of them. Is we're putting a representative, and so what happens to the siblings is, if the parents, particularly again the mother, the pregnant person, can acknowledge, can do that process, then very often for the sibling, it doesn't necessarily need to come up at all anymore, because they're the person who can do this process, and they're really the main person who can do this process. Nobody else really can. And then, of course, let's say there's the father in the kind of a little bit in the second place, and just because of the process of birth. So the siblings of, let's say, that miscarried child can may not have to look there again if the mother has already done the work. Yeah.
This is just very curious for me. What if, like, there are children in a family that were never told that there was, at some point in their lives, there was like a unborn child?
Hmm.
What would be the effect on their lives when there is like such happened before even they existed? Would that even affect their lives in a way?
It's a case by case. So often a good indication, when nobody knows and nobody has talked about it, including particularly the mother, let's say, it's a good indication that that child does not yet have a place in the system, that, let's say, miscarried child. And that then can cause a lot of imbalance for the living children. So, meaning the siblings. That is then where we can do this type of ritual that I just said. That is a very good place. And that can really shift a lot for people. If, sometimes I see this a lot when particularly a child died, like at a young age, like maybe age 3 or something, like something tragic happened, right? Sometimes families put up a little photo, have a little candle, tell their other children about the child. Maybe some of them remember, the older ones. That is at least a step towards healthy processing, because they're by their actions and talking about it, that person is still real. Like, that energy is still real. The person is still, has been given a place. That, let's say, brother, sister has a place, and then that's healthy. And then maybe it might not be a problem at all in terms of entanglement for the siblings. They're just very aware. Oh, this is our older brother, or this is our younger sister. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I noticed we never use the word "I forgive you." The magic word is "I honor you."
Hmm.
And we talk about that. What is so
Hmm.
magical about honoring somebody, even if they are the predators or people who have harmed in past?
Yeah. Careful there. Want to just be very careful here. The this is like, we could do like 17 hours of this. This is like my students. I talk to them about this for 10 plus hours. So like it's like
Okay.
a lot to unpack. If we go perpetrator victim dynamic, that is a very specific dynamic that we would look at in a very different manner and in a very layered manner. So there in particular, a perpetrator doesn't need to be honored at all if that's not what feels right in that system at all. And honored would here maybe also not be the right word, because it's more about, can this person have a place amongst the dead of that system? If that person, let's say the perpetrator can lie on the ground and the victims are lying on the ground as well, and that seems okay for the victims, that can happen and happens actually quite a lot. Again, I'm not judging. I'm just seeing what's true in the field. If that can happen, then I let that happen and allow, if it's okay for the victims, I always check in with the victims. If some of the victims are like, no way, then I might put a lot more distance. So there can be an acknowledgement of, you have entered my system, even though in a negative way, you have entered my system. You have killed some of my ancestors, right? By the way, we all have that to some extent in our systems. It may be further away for you, or it may be very close to you, but we all have those dynamics, perpetrator and victims, in our systems, if you go far enough back. Some people more, some people less, of course. But so that is one thing, like, just wanted to differentiate that. I'm going to start with the lightest form, which is accidents. Accidents are the perpetrator, so to speak, did not do something intentionally, right? So these are like, in terms of that very large scale and those kind of tragic scenarios, the lightest in regards to, there will be probably a path towards any form of empathy.
Yes.
Meaning, I can say, I might be really smoking mad at this person who was, let's say, a driver who ran into one of my family members. But I can, through the process of constellation, start seeing the dynamics. And the dynamics are always, no matter how gruesome, whatever happened, the perpetrator dies with their victims. Yeah. And so for some of you who were like a little bit like, I'm not sure where this is going, this is important to hear, because again, it's a very complex topic and you can all reach out to me individually if you need to. But the perpetrator dies with their victims. That on a soul level, that is always true. And that's, when we see a lot of injustice on a soul level, I would say that that's again, it's never just, right? But like, that's where the balance happens, at least a little bit. That perpetrator and their descendants will have to carry that load always. And so they don't, sometimes it seems like, oh, they got off the hook, right? When we sometimes say that. No, they did not. Yeah, on a soul and on a systemic level, they're totally entangled, even if it may not look. But somewhere, if you follow, let's say, like a family where there was a big perpetrator in the family, you will see it will carry down somewhere. Somebody will have to balance it. Somebody might, I'm taking a very extreme example, but I've seen pretty much every spectrum. Maybe somebody will take their life later on to balance something. And what that means on a soul level is they're following the victims into death to balance. Because
Oof.
let's say their ancestor has not been able to look and honor the victims. So the perpetrator always has to honor the victims. The victims obviously don't have to honor the perpetrator, but the perpetrator has to honor the victims. And the perpetrator has to give a place to the victim in their family system, saying, you have a place in my family. And the perpetrator must look and carry that weight. And usually that relieves, let's say, more victim family and the descendants of the victims. So that is, in terms of the movie, again, it's also, there's sometimes a lot more layers, but that's for our time here, like, that's the most important parts here. And it is, though sometimes this is what you were referring to, it can happen that the dead, let's say, I'm putting representatives lying on the floor for the victims, right? And there's the perpetrator as well, who's maybe also lying down. It can happen that the victims say, we want him to lie here. Like, we need him to also die here. And they're actually very relieved once the person lies down on the ground with them. That, to some of us sounds like, like what? But again, I'm just going with what I'm seeing in the field. And the reason being, if you ask me, why is that even possible? Why would that be okay for them on a soul level? Because if a perpetrator and the victim, taking somebody's life or your life being taken, there is and again, for lack of better word, fates are intertwining on on a life and death level. And that's why somebody's entering now my system. Yeah. Let's go back to the example of the truck driver. It's a little easier to imagine. They're entering my system because let's say they've taken my grandfather. Yeah. So I need to at least see that there is a truck driver. If I look away from there, my healing may be impacted. So the truck driver enters my system. And if I actually in a constellation can place him there and say, you are intertwined with my grandfather, even if I don't want that, but you are intertwined, and I can at least acknowledge that, that is healing because my energy doesn't have to then stay there anymore.